Hi, I'm Cher Kaufmann. I'm international author and artist of the Artful Mandala coloring book and the Ancient Alchemy coloring book. And today, for Mandalas and More, a meditative drawing and coloring book for mind, body, and spirit, we're going to do lesson 2. And lesson 2 is going to be a build off of everything that we talked about in lesson 1. So if you haven't had a chance to watch that video, I highly recommend it. It will talk to you a little bit about how to hold your body, how to begin the process of meditative drawing. And lesson 2, we're going to deepen that relationship that you have with your pen and your paper and the confidence in what a line looks like. Lines can vary. You can have a confident line on your paper that begins from the very beginning all the way to the end where the pen makes contact. And sometimes you can tell when the pen almost has a timid feeling to it, or that it was almost forceful on the paper. The line work actually gives that away. So today we're going to talk a little bit about when you hold your pen and the pressure that you use and the confidence in which you use your pen, how it can change what a line looks like. So let's begin. Okay, let's talk about confident lines. When we're talking about confident lines, it's a line that looks like it has a beginning and an end. It doesn't necessarily have to be straight. It's about that it has a beginning and an end. Sometimes when people are drawing very quickly, they'll start and they do kind of a slash mark. In other words, there's a confident touch where the pen has met the paper and then it just sort of drifts off into a thinner line over here. And that's actually a type of something that I might use to create an actual effect if I wanted to have that kind of look. But what I want to teach you is a little bit more about confident lines in the sense that you are creating the line that you want, the line that you want to be there, the line that you want to have making an impact. And this is a type of line that is going to have contact from the start point to the end point. Now, one of the things I've noticed with some of my students is that they will do a line and then they do this almost like a push off. They push harder at the very end, and right here it will create what I call it's like an ink ball. So I'm going to just make this a little bit bigger so you can see, but it's when a person draws a line and then they push off, it's almost like they're ending the line with a period at the end of the sentence. They dot the end of the line by putting pressure and they push off. And that is great to show the confident line and hooray, you've reached the end. But what that does is it's eventually going to cause some damage to the nib at the end of your pen if you constantly doing a push off at the very end of your line. And it also is going to change the consistency of your lines. So in other words, you're going to have maybe a lot of lines that have I'll exaggerate here, all these little balls at the end of them, which means that your eye is going to see that difference, even if it's very subtle. Even if it's very subtle and I do a little push off here, this tiny little dot is going to be different than the line itself. So you want to avoid a push off, not only so that your pen will last longer, but also so that your lines are more consistent. You want to avoid doing a sort of a dash or sort of throwing the pen out to get this type of effect in our beginning stages of drawing. So let's just talk about when we bring lines together. In the beginning, I would prefer that when you're doing your line drawing, if you come across another line that's existing, so let's just draw a little curved line and a straight line here. If I'm going to draw a line, when I meet a line that's existing, for your sense of practice, it is my preference to lift your pen to make contact and to lift your pen. And if you want to continue that in another area, you can. But what ends up happening here is that when you become aware of where an existing line is and you go to draw another line so that it meets it here, you become very aware of your surroundings. You become aware of what's existing on the paper, and then you're more connected to what your pen is doing. So say, for example, in lesson 1, we talked about doing circles. Now, one of the very important lessons in Lesson 1 with the circles is this point that's right here, which is where a circle begins and it ends. In other words, it makes contact, it goes all the way around. Now, when people are doing circles, what I've noticed with some students is that they just start drawing circles and they just start drawing circles and they don't pay attention and they're overlapping them. And that's fine if you're just drawing circles and don't necessarily have a pattern in mind and it's just about doing circles for the sake of circles. What I would like people to begin to do when they are developing a relationship with confident lines is to pay attention to what other lines are existing on the paper. This awareness makes a big difference of when you begin to build from small into larger, more complicated patterns, when you are paying attention to everything else that's existing on your paper, but also it begins to translate to the sense of boundaries in real life. If you can pay attention to something that exists on pieces of paper, you are more apt to pay attention to something that bumps up against you or the chance of you bumping up against another person in real life. So this small little lesson here actually has bigger energetic implications on how you pay attention to boundaries. So we want to think of that this line actually sets a boundary. So when we draw our lines, when we come up against an existing line, you want to lift your pen, at least right now at this stage when you're beginning to learn confidence in your lines. So say, for example, I have someone that does something like this. Right here, there's an open space. It doesn't actually touch that. If that's your intention, if that's what you wanted to happen, then that's an on-purpose confident line. If you meant to touch this but were afraid to go over, then this shows a lack of confidence in your line. It means that you didn't go up to the edge and have a sense of boundary of where it meets. So that's something to practice. Is this what you're intending? Is this what you're meaning to do, is to get close but not cross over? And that comes to the next point of crossing over accidentally. If I have a line that's already existing and I'm going to draw a line and I do this, I have crossed over the line. It's not as clean of a connection. So this is one of the things that you want to pay attention to, is how close you get to a line, the confidence that you have in drawing a line, and whether or not it crosses over. Crossing over can be something that you do intentionally if you're creating that type of pattern. So say this is my type of pattern that I wanted to create where I go slightly over. Then that's intention. And if that's the case, then I'll be confident in going over my existing line. But what I would like you to practice is creating boundaries where you go up to a line but not cross over it, no matter what your line is. So let's take this lesson, just translate it to playing with shapes. So what I suggest for people that are learning how to do shapes is that you do a triangle one line at a time. This will help you play with not only a sense of boundaries of your lines connecting with one another, paying attention to not doing that push off, but also it slows you down to just practicing a straight line. So even if I had a little bit of a wobbly line, and I'm going to rotate my paper here just so that my muscle memory has the same sense of drawing a line here. Okay, so say I had a wobbly line, my muscles maybe move, or something that is uncontrollable that I can't control, and that's just going to become my style. That's just going to be the way that I draw a straight line. That's very different. That is an okay thing. That's just your style. That's just how you draw. But I still would like you to practice drawing one line at a time. And you can change directions. You can see how close you can get to something. You can make it skinny. You can change how tall they are. The idea is that you are connecting these three individual lines, paying attention to boundary when they meet, and also this gives you a chance to play with an actual straight line. When I'm teaching my classes, I don't teach with rulers. And partly the reason that I teach with just an organic line building method is that I have found that if you learn with a tool, You never get a chance to develop the skill on your own, and you become dependent on the tool. So if I'm always drawing my triangles with a ruler's edge, I will never be able to develop the sense of trust that I can do a straight line all by myself. Same thing with circles. So when we move to just drawing any kind of shape that has a straight line, I would like you to practice doing one line at a time. Just one line at a time. Lift your pen gently, don't push off. And just begin to practice how you hold your pen, how you do your straight lines. Now, say I did something like this. And you're like, oh man, that's not straight at all. It's all at an angle. That's okay. The idea is that you want to begin muscle memory in being able to hold your pen, being able to create a confident line, paying attention to your edges. Here's an example of what I would prefer that you not do, which is something like this. Now, I've got rounded edges here. I've got a crossover. What happens is that if I'm trying to draw a triangle super fast and I round my edges and I don't pay attention to the boundary at the top, I'm going to end up with a slightly different shape. This doesn't look like a triangle so much as maybe a teardrop. And this is something that you want to pay attention to. If you're going to be making a shape, I'd like you to completely connect to that shape. It will slow you down at first. You're going to think, I already know how to draw a triangle. This seems silly. Well, it's actually very relaxing. If you just give yourself a chance just to see what does it feel like if I just play with different size triangles. You know, it begins to change how something looks. It's very different when I just take the time just to play with a single shape. Same thing happens with rectangles. Is that sometimes people feel like they already know, well, now my line isn't straight over here and I'm beginning to round my corner. So I may have started out well, but now I'm trying to rush through something. So you want to think of this as not an athletic exercise where you're trying to develop skill fast. This is an exercise where you're getting your body, your muscles, your brain, your creativity to work together. And the other little thing that I would like just to show you real quick with lines is that if you're going to be drawing a straight line, if you move actually from the elbow, arm, wrist, hand as a single movement, you're more apt to create a straight line longer than if you were trying to do something just from your wrist. If I'm going to be doing something from my wrist, I'm going to be able to do a natural curve because my wrist moves, or a natural curve this way. But if I'm going to be doing a long straight line using my arm as a single unit, I'm more apt to create a connection that's slightly different if I use my whole arm as a unit. And it's not about perfection. It's about creating a confident line so that it starts and it ends with the same amount of pressure and the same amount of contact. So I want to show you here real quick, in the book Mandalas and More, there is a section here that's about triangles and squares and rectangles, and it shows you what it looks like when you're drawing one line at a time. And I also have a page here that's an example of what not to do about your rounded edges and what happens when you're not confident in meeting your corners or you're crossing over. And you can see that there's a very big difference when there's a confident line in that shape. The other thing I'd like to mention in this book that you can read further about is the section on straight lines. And here it'll show the examples that we went through today on what a crossover, what a clean connection looks like, a confident line, the ink ball, and also that slash mark where it starts confident but it just fades off. These are examples to remind you of ways that you can create an awareness to how your pen has a relationship with the paper. The other thing is, in the book there are art points. These little sections right here are little bonus pieces of information to help you have the best experience, to learn about pattern recognition and your hand-eye coordination of things that you might not think about. So having the intention of connecting your lines, the pen and the paper, your mind and your body all together, is what's going to create the most beneficial experience, the most satisfying experience when you're doing meditative drawing. For more information, you can look at Mandalas and More Meditative Drawing and Coloring Book for Mind, Body, and Spirit. So now that you have a couple of lessons and they're very basic, very, very simple, you can find more information in the Mandalas and More book, and we'll continue to do videos that will help to enhance that experience. But you'll find that these very basic and very simple lessons actually continue to build in ways that you may not even know about yet, or expand the way that you look at the world around you. And that's probably the most important treasure that you'll get, is how something small can actually create a much larger experience. From the Drawing Desk, I'm Cher Kaufmann. May you find more inspiration in your days.